Elon Musk officially merging his AI and social media empire.
Brain to voice. Could AI finally give a voice to people who have lost theirs?
Amazon going all in on AI agents with the Nova agent, a system capable of performing multi-step tasks directly in a web browser.
Dartmouth researchers have completed their first ever clinical trial of a generative AI therapy chatbot called Therabot.
OpenAI, this week they have raised a reported $40 billion at a $300 billion valuation. OpenAI announced that they will be releasing their first open weights model since GPT-2. OpenAI introduced PaperBench, a benchmark designed to test an AI agent's ability to autonomously replicate AI research papers.
Tinder just dropped the game designed to help you sharpen your flirting skills.
Runway has launched their Gen 4 model, its latest AI-powered video generation model.
Can we finally peer inside the black box? This is what Anthropic is trying to do with Claude.
Anthropic has released Claude for education. Welcome back to What the AI, where we decode the latest developments in the world of artificial intelligence. I'm Jeff Keltner.
And I'm Annie Delgado. How you doing, Jeff?
I'm pretty good. How are you doing, Annie?
Pretty good. I am excited it's Friday. It was a busy week for me. We had a big on-site for work this week, so I was in office all week. There's always so much energy, but it sort of also a little bit drains your social battery. But it was exciting to
Absolutely.
see colleagues from around the country all sort of convene in the Bay Area and work on some hard problems. So it was great.
On-sites are
Yeah.
always great. Anything interesting in the on-site? Any interesting stories coming out of that?
Well, so much interesting, much of which, of course, I can't tell. But we did have one of my employees comes from Florida, and every time he's really excited to come to the Bay Area so he can rent a Tesla, and then he can use this as his rental car to get around. And this time there was no Teslas at the rental car shop, so I was curious if this was because they've all been taken out, or if Teslas are just sort of disappearing from the Bay Area. Are you seeing
Weird.
something similar in Los Angeles?
Not yet. I'm not seeing any. I don't rent Teslas all the time. I don't rent cars very often, but
Yeah.
I'm not. I definitely have people going, "Are you still driving around in that Tesla?" I like that. And
Ooh,
I've
are
got a
you
friend
still
who
driving
makes.
around in the
I,
Tesla?
I I have a Tesla. I still drive it. I mean,
Okay.
I do have a friend who's got an Etsy shop where he made stickers for Tesla that say, "I bought it before Elon went crazy." So there's like a little, or no, sorry, I bought it before the plot twist. That was his little
Before the plot
tagline.
twist,
I
yeah.
bought it before the plot twist to put on your Tesla. So maybe I'll have to get one of those so I don't, get my car keyed or whatever's going on. Crazy, crazy people in the world
You
thinking
might.
that you somehow did it. But Elon Musk kicking us off with our AI Rater. First news story of the day this week: Elon Musk officially merging his AI and social media empire. It's gotta get everything into one for Elon. His startup XAI has acquired his other startup X, formerly Twitter, in an all-stock deal, forming a new $100 billion entity called XAI Holdings. So now Grok from XAI and X, or Twitter, that is XAI for Grok and X for Twitter, just call it Grok and Twitter, are now one, and Musk called the futures intertwined, highlighting plans to kind of combine their compute, models, data, and talent. So really interesting to see them combining social media and AI into a single company. Probably good for Musk. He got rid of that X thing hanging around his neck, but also I think the data to train the models and keep up to date information is a really interesting angle to how they think the value accrues in this thing.
Yeah, and I think it's also touches on something we've talked about before about what is the most important aspect of the business model. Is it your model or is it your distribution? And, here Elon is really with both. He's got the model and the distribution because obviously so many users already. So that'll be interesting to watch the adoption.
Interesting. I still use Grok. I do find it, what I use it for most now is my super conservative friends who don't believe anything out of the mainstream media. Grok is actually pretty accurate. So if you ask it things and they go, "Oh, I only believe Elon Musk," I go, well, here's what Grok says. You can ask about tariffs or about misinformation, and it's pretty good, pretty accurate, and it seems to be a more reliable source, at least to my in-laws, than other sources of information. So I leverage Grok a lot for that. But you're right, the distribution angle and the data from X feeding, kind of real time information into the system will be a really interesting advantage for XAI and Grok moving forward.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Amazon, next story up, Amazon going all in on AI agents. I feel like everybody wants an agent now. So Amazon's getting in on the act with the Nova agent, a system capable of performing multi-step tasks directly in a web browser. So this seems to be the agent thing too, like open up a web browser and a virtual computer and do stuff for you. And they highlighted filling out web forms, navigating sites, making purchases, and particularly complicated workflows, asking for certain changes or upsells or things like this. This is developed by Amazon's AGI Labs. and it supposedly outperformed rivals like Claude 3.5, Sonnet, and OpenAI's computer user agent operator that they have out there. So we'll see how this. It's not fully out yet. I think coming over time to Alexa Plus. So another reason to pop on the Alexa Plus bandwagon. But interesting to see Amazon out there actually putting an agent out in the world as well, along with both Anthropic has one, OpenAI has one, everybody has one.
Well, we've been talking about agents for a while, and it seems like, and we've also been talking about kind of Amazon and what they're going to do in this AI race, but they sort of are skipping the LLM chatbot assistant phase that everyone else sort of started with and going straight to the agent. And I think that might be a good play for them because I think that they probably have the best shot at really making something that's going to be useful and integrated with people's daily life because people are already so used to using their Echo for various things. So I'm excited about this. And I think we talked about the upgrade to Alexa coming in September, I think it was. So it's not too far off that we'll see this.
Yeah, and it is really interesting if you think about some of the use cases Amazon's highlighting, kind of shopping outside of Amazon, right? Like if I'm shopping for flights, I'm shopping for hotels, I want your help doing something. They kind of own the shopping experience, and but there are still kinds of shopping and purchasing you can't do in Amazon, and they're probably not likely to have. And so, extending Amazon's retail footprint and their mind space of where you go when you want to buy something or purchase anything of value, probably pretty valuable for them to be able to go outside of just the Amazon footprint and actually help you with purchases of other things, even higher value items like travel items, hotels, flights. Really interesting to see them get in that space.
Yeah, the other thing that I saw, and I'm curious to see how it's going to work, is that you can sort of configure the agent. It sounds like to do things like not accept upsell, and so it really is like acting on your behalf, and that sort of seems counter to the typical business model who gets paid for advertising and for all of those upsell capabilities. So to actually have an agent that they're powering that will not allow for that type of thing is going to be interesting to see how they manage sort of both sides of their marketplace because they have consumers that they have an obligation to, but they also have merchants that they have obligations to. And so how do they sort of find that balance?
Yeah, it'll be interesting, but Amazon's mentality has pretty much always been, I find the best deal for my consumer, and as long as I can aggregate enough consumers, the merchants must come. And I just the better deal. It's kind of the old Costco model, right? Like I just get screaming good deals. I use my leverage to improve the consumer experience, and then I leverage that into kind of people can't avoid me because I'm too big a player, and I did that on the basis of value for consumers. So it doesn't surprise me that they would go that route compared to maybe more advertising oriented businesses. So,
Yeah, makes sense.
all right. Well, moving on. OpenAI always got to have OpenAI news in our AI radar. This week they've raised 40 billion, not $40 billion valuation, but they have raised a reported $40 billion at a $300 billion valuation. This round being led by SoftBank. Apparently, interesting structure of this. They're getting 10 billion upfront. And then the remaining 30 is contingent on their completion of the migration over to the for-profit company from the nonprofit. So a little incentive for them to get fully over the line on this conversion to a for-profit entity. But 30, or sorry, $40 billion is a lot of money. It's so shocking that we raise rounds of that size now.
I know it is wild, and it's sort of interesting, like, do we know what they're gonna spend this money on? Because it seems like some of the recent signals from Sam have been that, like, their major constraint isn't cash or users, it's actually infrastructure, right? They need GPUs, and they need data centers, and they need cooling stuff, and all of that is, like, multiple years away, and it's not a throw money at the problem type of problem. So how do you think they're gonna spend this 40,000,000,000?
I imagine it's almost all going to NVIDIA and GPUs or some sort of data infrastructure over time. If I were them, I'd be grabbing money now while things are hot. They are growing so rapidly. So they said monthly revenues are up 30%. The user base is now over 500 million weekly users. And apparently the studio Ghibli Art added up to at one point a million users an hour. India, the fastest growing markets, they're getting into new markets with this image generation. So my sense is you raise money when you don't need money. That's the best time to raise. Right now, they don't really need money, but they're going to need GPUs. And if you go do the image generation or some of their LLM models right now, I find the responses have gotten much, much slower. And I think that's just a capacity issue. So they're going to be knocking on Jensen Huang's door saying, how many of these chips can we get our hands on? each month. And my bet is they're just building up their war chest to be able to continuously buy those as long as they need them.
Makes sense. I mean, the image generation was the whole story of the last week. Everybody is excited to try out their new capabilities there. So,
Yeah,
and they're pretty impressive.
they're a lot of fun. I've been having fun coming up with different styles of art to translate my family photos into, which has been a good time. Last piece of OpenAI news: they have announced that they will be. I hate these pre-announcements, but they've announced that they will be releasing their first open weights model since GPT-2, in quote the coming months, so sometime soon. But this is interesting because there is a shift in more to a for-profit model away from the research lab. The value that accrues to not having open weights was essentially kind of not fully open source of the model, not open training data, but anybody can go and run the model in their own data center with the weights. It's interesting that they're going to go back to that model. I don't know if this will be the most capable model or some sort of a less capable model. It's not clear, but getting back a little bit to their roots and releasing an open weights model sometime soon. So that was another interesting thing they announced this week.
Yeah, I was interested to hear that too, and I'm excited, honestly, because I think one of the big growth challenges that OpenAI will have as long as they don't have the open weight models is more regulated industries that really want more secure sort of control over how their employees are using the data and how the data is kept private and secure and all of that. If you have an open weight model sort of system, you can use, OpenAI and not have to use one of the other ones that you also wouldn't be able to use because it's just from Hugging Face or something like that. So, I think they'll get some more adoption from releasing their weights.
Yeah, it's going to be fascinating to see how they play the what is available open weights versus what is in the tool and what do you have to pay us to use, like what's going to stay in the free tier versus the paid tier versus the super highly expensive $200 a month tier. Just fascinating to see these guys' business models play out.
Yeah.
While we're talking about image generation, we got news on the video generation front this week. Runway has launched their Gen 4 model, its latest AI powered video generation model. And the kind of thing they focused on, we talked about this before, consistent characters and scenes across multiple shots. So you can kind of, when you're trying to tell a story and you got changing camera angles or even changing scenes for the character moving from one place to another, outdoors, indoors, whatever, much better at maintaining visual integrity between characters and objects between different scenes, currently rolling out to their paid and enterprise users. So this is not something I have access to. I did look at some of the examples, and they're pretty darn impressive what these guys can generate off of just text. So interesting to see not just the kind of image generation. I haven't heard a lot about Sora video generation from OpenAI, but Runway out here really focused on high quality video generation with a brand new model.
Yeah, video generation is not something that I've spent a bunch of time playing around with, but I was interested in this announcement that they really have leaned into it being production ready, which is not
Yeah.
something I think I've heard before. Are there others out there that you've heard of being like marketing that their model is so good it's production ready?
I haven't really heard that per se. I mean, so many of them are kind of doing short clips and easy stuff. And I think Runway is really focused on being a tool for Hollywood, maybe not the high end Hollywood, but I kind of think of it in many ways like the handheld video cameras. I mean, back when I was a kid, making a video was hard, and you couldn't just be an aspiring filmmaker and walk around. And now you just grab your iPhone and you can do that. And this is kind of, I think their goal has been to unleash the creativity and capability for high end production to people who don't have access to high end equipment. Right, and so they've really been focused on that high end production from the beginning at Runway, and it shows in the quality of what they put out.
Yeah, cool.
All right, 2 more here in our radar. OpenAI coming back. This was a little bit of an inside baseball interesting topic. Introduced what they called PaperBench, a benchmark designed to test an AI agent's ability to autonomously replicate AI research papers. So basically going, we hear so much about AI coding and science and math knowledge in these language models. Now, basically saying, can you take for a set of papers, 20 leading papers from 2024, they say, can you go replicate the results of these papers, write the code, validate the code, which was really, it's kind of like we talked last week about benchmarks and what is the right benchmark in humanities last exam versus ARC AGI 2 or 1. And here a benchmark of like, can you do AI research as a benchmark for capable AI, which I thought was a really interesting thing. Certainly valuable if you're open AI and you want to replace your engineers and your researchers with your own tool. Like this is a great metric, but maybe not the most general metric.
Yeah. Well, and they said 21% replication score, and I have no baseline for if that's good or bad.
Yeah, I think it's okay, it's not great. All these tests are really funny because it's like, if you gave an ML expert these things, they don't have a 100% replication score either, right? So it's like, you kinda think of it like pass, fail. Like, I always wanna put in a test like, "Oh, did I get an A? A 90% plus, I'm in the A territory. Am I getting a B? Am I getting a C?" And I think this is a pretty good score, but will be interesting to see if this causes them the availability of this benchmark to focus on OpenAI or others on actually building the AI models towards being able to push the frontier models of AI forward in terms of machine learning research itself, which is kind of that partially that moment people worry about when the AI becomes self-improving such that it, has the kind of takeoff scenario where the AI gets so good at building AI that it just improves itself exponentially in a very short period of time and becomes super, super intelligent over a very, abbreviated timeline. So I guess they're a little bit focused on reaching such a point.
Yeah.
All right, our last topic for this week in AI radar, Anthropic has released Claude for education. So a kind of a special version of the Claude chatbot targeting universities, integrating into teaching, learning, and administration. This was interesting. They introduced a learning mode where Claude is supposed to not just answer your questions, but using Socratic or other questioning techniques, lead you to the right answer the way a teacher or a tutor might. Um, they're also trying to get administrators and faculty using these tools for development of curriculum materials or other administrative purposes, and partnered with an interesting set of three initial strategic partners: Northeastern University, LSE, which I know is the London School of Economics, but I guess is rebranded to LSE because it was just LSE everywhere, and Champlain College. So this was really interesting that they're coming out with a specific version for education that has a kind of learning version, and then access university wide, at least some number of universities. I imagine that number will be growing rapidly.
Yeah, I'm happy to see this, and I'm happy to see just sort of more focus on how to use AI safely and responsibly in the education system because we've talked a lot before about different, tutoring platforms and this type of thing that have tested AI relative to human tutors or human teachers. And so we can see that there's a lot of opportunity there, but the education industry needs to sort of think about how to apply that opportunity and not have it be that it just does the work rather than teaching the person how to think through and really sort of pushing the brain power. So I'm glad to see people starting to sort of think about this and lean into it because I think this is going to be really important for the future of education.
Yeah, I agree. And for those parents who listen to the podcast, if you have not helped your kids use OpenAI's ChatGPT as a tutor or just I had one of my sons was, trying to practice. He wasn't doing so well in a particular class. And he said, "Hey, I need to practice stuff." I said, just give it your materials and tell it you want to get quizzed. Or if it's something simple, just tell it what it is. I want to get quizzed on the 5 grammar subjects. And it just comes up with examples on the fly, quizzes, explains to you when you're right, when you're wrong. And to be honest, even my middle school son, when it gets to the grammar stuff, I don't even remember what those words mean. So I'm not a lot of help. And he goes, "What's supposed to be a transitive and an intransitive verb, Dad?" I'm like, I don't know. I got to ask ChatGPT. It's been a long time since I've done any kind of grammar, son. So it's a really great tool in that way, and it's I think great to see Anthropic pushing Claude to have a mode specifically targeting students. And I guess in response, OpenAI announced that for through May, all college students in the U.S. and Canada will get access to the $20 per month ChatGPT Plus tier, not the Pro $200 a month, but you can get the latest models for all you college students. Through May was kind of odd, like through the end of the school year. Then we'll reevaluate for next year, I guess. I don't know. But I felt like this one felt very much like Anthropic came out with a cool announcement and ChatGPT is like, we got to do something. Let's give them some free stuff for a couple months.
That's right. They don't want to lose that distribution possibility for the future.
They got to make it into the rundown for our OpenAI radar. Anthropic's in there. They got to have their little bullet point too.
That's right. Well, Jeff, let's move on to AI in the wild. And let me tell you, there are some wild in the wild stories to talk about this week.
There are.
So, starting with brain to voice. So, could AI finally give a voice to people who have lost theirs? Researchers at UC Berkeley and UCSF have developed new groundbreaking technology that will literally transform brain signals directly into speech in real time. And so this is actually sort of a fascinating thing to think about. Literally, what the model does is it can sort of connect to the brain of somebody who has been injured and for whatever reason has lost their ability to speak. Or in some cases, the person hadn't lost their ability to speak, but just speaks quite slowly because the processing time to get the thought out verbally is become so long because of whatever injury or situation has happened. And they can actually target the signal not your all of your thoughts, but the specific signal of what you are trying to say and map that, and they can put it out using sort of an AI voice that they also developed based on the person's pre-injury voice. So it actually sounds like the person as well. So this is just a mind-boggling thing to think about this kind of possibility. I watched some videos and read some of the experience of one of the women in the test study, and it was just really remarkable. She's just in the process of thinking something, and then this AI generated voice is able to articulate it on her behalf with high fidelity and accuracy. So very interesting.
This is one of those, like, futuristic, like, you watch this thing go, "I feel like I'm living in the future," when you see this thing. It's just crazy, and so rewarding to see how life-altering it can be for the people who get access to this stuff. But I did take a couple of, like, really practical things away for anybody applying AI, which was, like, some of the things that made the system remarkable were focusing on low latency, so the value of speed for them really changed the nature of the experience. The personalization, like, to your point, they took recordings of the person's voice before they lost it, and were able to use that to generate a custom voice to speak in, and that, like, made a huge difference in how people perceive the system. So things that are not like pure hard ML problems, but that kind of personalization, that kind of latency, was really interesting. And the last one that just strikes me is we don't actually even know how the brain does these things. Like, we don't, like, they don't understand the data at some core level that they're using to train a model. And the sense that you can train an AI model to make sense of data that you couldn't explain to it what it was and how it was working is a really fascinating aspect of this. When you think about what kind of problems can you solve with AI or ML, the idea that I can solve problems that I don't even know what the answer is, but if I just throw enough data at the right kind of model, maybe it can figure out the answer that I don't even understand yet. That's a fascinating concept.
Yeah, I mean, it's totally mind-boggling to think about because you hear all the time in the sort of field of brain study that there's just so little that we know relative to the vast amount of information that's going on in there. But somehow this model can map the specific pathways of specific signals. So you're not intercepting the thought, but you're intercepting the planned translation of the thought into, verbal articulation is just, it's totally mind-boggling and fascinating to me that this is possible and that we're living this far in the future.
Yeah, this is a pretty crazy one. I enjoyed watching some of the videos. It's a really cool, check out the story if you guys want, because it's quite heartwarming to see.
It is. Well, speaking of brain mapping, let's move on to the Therabot. So, could AI chatbot genuinely replace a therapist? Dartmouth researchers have completed their first ever clinical trial of a generative AI therapy chatbot called Therabot with some pretty promising results. What the study has found was that by using Therabot to treat mental health symptoms, patients reported a 51% reduction in depression, a 31% reduction in anxiety. And this is sort of rivaling the numbers that you get with traditional human therapy, although at a more rapid clip than you would see in some of the reported human based therapy. They've also reported sort of feeling meaningful relationships and connections with Therabot relative to, a ChatGPT or something else, but they have a similar sort of trust level with the bot as they do with a human therapist. So this is very interesting. There's a long pathway to sort of getting this type of thing approved or widely used, and I think there's a lot of like ethical questions that people might have and concerns they might be raising. But the big promise here, which is an amazing statistic to think about, for every one mental health professional in the United States, there's 1,600 people diagnosed with depression. So we are just nowhere near having enough manpower to treat the sort of mental health needs of, and that's just one mental health need, depression, right? There's a whole host of other things as well. And so we're nowhere near having enough humans to help with this. And so could AI support us accelerating here, make it more available for people who can't afford traditional mental health services today because it is really expensive and oftentimes not covered by your insurance. So I think there's a lot to love here and also a lot to be a little bit cautious about as well.
I'm probably a little more on the love and a little less on the cautious side than you are, Annie. I mean, I love this, and I do think that it highlights to me when you evaluate, is this thing a good thing or bad thing? How do we regulate? What kind of barriers should we put up? I think there's a natural inclination to go, how does it compare to what we do today? Is it better than seeing a therapist? And of course, your what we do today is usually the high end of what's available to a small segment of people. And so you go, oh, well, it's got to be better and absolutely fail safe compared to seeing a therapist, weekly in office. And I go, well, a lot of people using these bots don't. That's not the alternative. Then the alternative is self-help websites or ChatGPT that's not a therapy-oriented bot or whatever. And so I think it's easy to kind of misconstrue what the alternative is for many of the users and then place safeguards in place that assume an availability of a certain thing that's not there. And the other thing that struck me when I read this article is still the research has described in-person therapy as the gold standard. And I kind of want to go, is it like I think there's this sense in which you can go, we're trying to replicate the old way, but is there a better way that's enabled? And the two things that occurred to me were one, two features of an AI chatbot that they mentioned in this, which were A, it's accessible to you instantaneously anywhere you want. So you don't have to, write it down or think about it till my next therapy session, whatever. If you've got a crisis, a moment, a challenging issue that faces you, you can just access it instantaneously, which is something no human therapist can actually provide, no matter how much shrinking makes it feel like you can text your therapist whenever you want, and Jason Siegel will just call you right back and take care of you. Like that's not really how it works. And some of the users actually reported being more willing to share because they felt a lack of judgment. And even though every therapist will tell you, they're not going to judge, like there's still a very human element of sharing an intimate, embarrassing, difficult personal story with another human being that's kind of like can be difficult to do, and it takes many people a long time to open up. And so it just made me think, like, is it possible that as opposed to trying to replicate what we've got, there's a better thing we can build for many people on the back of AI that we're not thinking about because we think of the current way as the gold standard, well, maybe it's, not the best we can do for certain people when we have different tools available.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think the other thing to love about this relative to traditional therapy is done with humans, and even the most incredible service provider and, the best therapist out there is still a human, and they get distracted, and they got other stuff going through their minds, and when you're interacting with a Therabot that's just for you, it's not thinking about anything else. It is 100% focused on your problem at that moment, and I think that that is sort of feature of this sort of thing. The thing that I think and again, like, maybe it's just a numbers game, it's too challenging, but I still do have some of that concern that we've talked about in previous, segments about how important it is to develop human connections, and if it's like if this type of thing is overused or it is used to replace human connection, then I don't think that that is the good thing. It should be a both and, it should be a supplement, right? So I would love to see the Therabot helping address the sort of acute need that the person has, but also encouraging them to, get out there and develop connections and reunite with their family and all this type of stuff. And those are the lack of human connections are the things that I think I worry about the most with overuse of chatbots. All right, one more wild story for you. How's your game, Jeff?
I've been married a long time, Andy. I don't have game. I haven't had a game for a long time.
I'm gonna ask Ivy how your game is. But so Tinder just dropped the game, which is an interactive OpenAI powered speech to speech experience designed to help you sharpen your flirting skills with practicing them with virtual personas. So the idea is that before you go out on a date, you can do a trial run with this AI game in Tinder to sort of practice your flirting, practice conversation, and you can select the content that you want to talk about. You can have the content or have the conversation, and then it'll give you feedback on how successful you are or not. So,
I
how
I'm
do you
gonna be
feel
honest,
about
Andy.
this?
I try very hard to, like, watch the videos, read all the art, everything we're gonna talk about, I try and, like, use a little bit, and I couldn't bring myself to create a Tinder account as a 40-something married man to just practice my game in the game. It felt inappropriate. I just debating this with my wife, I couldn't do it. But this was really interesting, and to your earlier point about human connections, I mean, Tinder intentionally caps this at 5 sessions per day, encouraging you to use it as a short-term practice, not a permanent replacement, although I don't know how it could be a replacement. Um, but this was fascinating to me. I don't know where I come down on this being good or bad. I mean, it's like certainly I've having teenage, teenagers. I see teenage flirting, and I go, a little practice wouldn't hurt sometimes. And then just general, forget flirting, just general social construct. You see lots of kids who are kind of awkward and uncomfortable, and that practice probably isn't bad. But the game is, I don't know. To me, it just feels a step too far. But I couldn't really tell you why.
That's interesting. So, I think actually I think I like this one. I think I don't know about the distribution channel of Tinder, but just generally I like the idea of being able to practice because it is so nerve-wracking to meet somebody new and to be stressed about like I don't know if I'm saying the right thing or if I'm interesting or not interesting. And so if you can sort of have that trial run so you go in a little bit less nervous, maybe you'll be a little bit more present and a better active listener and all that type of stuff. Many moons ago, I think I've told you before, I used to be a ballroom dance instructor.
Oof.
And oftentimes people would come in for a ballroom dance lesson hoping that I would teach them how to dance at a bar or a club or something so that they could have better game, and it was always a disappointing fact when I would say, like, "That's actually not the kinda dance like, if you do my kinda dancing at the bar, you will not be popular. You will not be it will not work out." But, people would come in just because they were like, "I really want to go and, like, interact with humans, but I'm very nervous, I'm very not coordinated, I'm very awkward, whatever it might be. Can you help me overcome some of these things?" And, going once a week to ballroom dance lessons is a slow drip to overcome that thing, but maybe Tinder can help you get there faster. I don't know.
It is fair that in almost every aspect of life, we think of practice as being critical to being good at something. And this is certainly a skill that people want to be good at, whether you think of it in the context of flirting and dating or just small talk at a, you know, I think people would love this in terms of just, I'm going to a cocktail party with a bunch of work colleagues and I'm going to a conference. I'm going to be at the cocktail. And I don't, what do I ask people? What do I say to people? How do I present myself or be interesting or interested? And certainly, like in sport or in school, you practice, you take practice tests, you get ready, and there's no real good version of that for social skills. So maybe this will be a nice little practice, practice session for social skills. It is a fascinating idea, especially to your point. If you can tie it to an encouragement to engage in real world human to human interaction, and this is more of a way to be better at that as opposed to a replacement for that. I think of that as a quite good thing.
Yeah, I think if it hadn't been Tinder that dropped this and it was something else, maybe your reaction and my initial reaction would have been a little bit different. And I just think about, like, coming out of the pandemic as an example, my all of our children were in remote learning environments for a long period of time, and then my son went straight back into 8th grade, which is a pretty awkward time in the
Yeah.
best of times, but if you've just been, remote learning for 2 years, even more awkward. So, I kind of feel like it might have been helpful to have a little practice runs to, like, reintegrate with, like, how do I talk to a teacher versus a peer versus this, that, or the other thing. Maybe I shouldn't go in and call my teacher bro on my first day back, that type of thing. I think this might have been useful, but I would definitely not condone him signing up for Tinder.
We'll see if we find a alternative version of this, or maybe a really good prompt for ChatGPT to replicate this in a non-game way. I'm really curious now how it evaluates you with bad pickup lines. Like, does it tell you don't do that? Please don't do that, or does it encourage the cheesy pickup line from the rom com movie? I don't know. Now I want to get an account and go test it out.
I know. Well, yeah, there you go. We'll see next I'm gonna follow up with you next week and see if you tried it out. Well, we're going to transition to our AI alignment in a much more tame story than the game. Can we finally peer inside the black box? This is what Claude, or Anthropic, is trying to do with Claude. They have literally cracked open Claude's mind and provided some insight into how it actually thinks. And so this is really interesting to see both that they're investing in this, but also that they're sort of publishing the results, because there is a lot of discussion and debate in various industries about the black box nature of AIs and how we feel about that. A lot of people think there's a existential risk in using an AI tool because we don't actually know how the tool operates. I actually disagree with that risk strongly because I also don't know how the brain operates and I trust humans. So this is, I think, maybe sort of part of the issue, but people are more likely to trust a human than they are to trust machine, and part of it is because that they don't understand what's going on in the machine. So Claude is trying to answer this question, or Anthropic is trying to answer this question, and there's some pretty fascinating insights that have come out of this. So one thing that was pretty interesting is that the AI doesn't have a native language. So what language does it think in is sort of a question, and it actually, you can see in sort of how they have looked into this, that it's sort of using a language of thought that sort of transcends all of the different languages that it's trained on. So that's pretty fascinating to think about. I also was fascinated to learn, when you sort of heard early descriptions of how an LLM works, you heard this description of it thinks of a word and then it generates the next word and then it generates the next word. They did a, sort of poetry test with Claude where they gave it the first line of a poem and they asked it to come up with the next line, And what they found is actually it picked the last word first, and then it sort of backed into the rest of the line. So it didn't do sequential left to right reading like we would have thought that it does. It actually started at the end and worked its way backwards. So that was a pretty interesting sort of insight to see. And then the last piece was it will lie to you about its chain of thought, which is also pretty fascinating. So they cracked open a math problem, which of course LLMs are trained on text, and so they are designed primarily as a text tool. But so they asked it a simple math problem, like a simple addition problem, and they watched the reasoning in the model of how the math problem got solved, and it got solved in this sort of, I will call it a Common Core-esque type of way, which is very different from how we were trained to do math, and that's how it solved the problem. But then when you asked it, "How did you solve that problem?" It answered the way we were all trained, "Do this, carry the one." So it was sort of knew that that's how humans traditionally solve the problem, even though it also knew the sort of smarter way to get there in the background, and it was using that strategy as well. So pretty fascinating.
Yeah, I found I mean, I didn't there's the 2 underlying papers that they produced as well as the article about the papers, and the papers are very long and pretty dense, and I scanned through some of them. But this is they I think they describe it as the AI microscope where they kind of visualize which neurons are activated and are able to kind of do some of this. And it was really fascinating, the idea that there are concepts in the neurons that are consistent across language. So whether you're large or grand in French or English or da in Chinese, like, oh, it's the same concept, and the concept of an antonym is there, so you can kinda, like, apply these things to one another. It was really fascinating that that's true. The planning surprised me, although I heard one time a great description from, I think it was Ilya Sutskever, who was talking about how to think about, well, that it's just next word prediction. He goes, "Yeah, but to be really good at that, think about how hard that is. Like, you've got a mystery story, like your favorite mystery novel, and you get to the big aha moment, and, like, can it fill in that next word accurately? Like, that's not a simple thing. It's not autocomplete on your phone. It's a very complicated understanding of things to get that next word right. And to your point in poetry, getting the next word right involves understanding what you might want to say 4 or 5 words on a line to rhyme. And then how do I get to, I want to rhyme this word with that word. So how do I fill in the sentence to get to that final word that makes my rhyme complete that works? And that's kind of how we do think. And it's not how we naturally intuited next word prediction, but it is how the models are actually thinking, which was fascinating because people didn't really understand that it was predicting. Some of these they said were not what they expected to find. They didn't expect to find pre-planning. And then they tested it and like, oh, it is pre-planning out words. Like we didn't know it could do that. So really interesting to see them investing in understanding how this thing is working. And then I think a lot of questions about how does this help you either in interpretability and explainability, or how does it help you in understanding how to put safeguards into the kinds of things you don't want the model to do. I mean, it certainly helps to understand how the model is doing what it does if you want to prevent it from doing certain things that you don't want it to do. And this is a big step in that direction.
Yeah, one of the things that I'm just excited is that there's been a lot of speculation or skepticism, I guess, with people saying like, "Oh, we will never be able to use AI in this context because of its lack of explainability." And I've always sort of never believed that because I think there's the first thing of how explainable does it have to even be? That's a debate, fine. But I also have never accepted that we won't ever be able to figure out how to explain it. So I'm really excited to see Anthropic actually going after that and saying, "We will figure this out. Here, we're gonna develop the microscope. We're gonna be able to answer some of these questions." And so I'm glad to see this coming out, and I think it'll go a long way in sort of helping build trust and build sort of consumer trust and sort of broader industry trust in some of these types of tools. So I'm here for
Some
it.
of these things feel like the uncomfortable mirror. Like, it's got the part where it kind of lies to you about its thought process, and they were kind of able to get it to give a reasonable sounding argument for how it came to an answer when the answer was wrong. Because it said, "Well, if you told it, I think this is the answer," we'll go, "Oh yeah, yeah, you're right," and then it'll like construct a whole chain of thought it's totally bogus. It's not at all accurate, and it reminds me a lot of like you can think of that as, oh, it's lying to you. And I go, but humans do the same thing so often. We come up with the answer we want, and then we like, you're like, oh yeah, why do you think that? Oh well, it's probably a great example where you come up with your belief, and then all of a sudden there's like this whole chain of thought that you give, and it's like you did not go through that chain of thought to come up with this conclusion. You came up with the conclusion that you intuited to be right for whatever set of reasons that we don't understand in your brain, and then you like post facto justified it to yourself with a whole bunch of rationalization. And like sometimes you see these things, and I see people criticizing the models as behaving in and unethically, let's say, because they're making up rationales. And I'm like, I mean, I think people do the same thing quite a bit where we come up with what we want to be true based on some reasons we may not want to say. And then we give a rationalization that is separate from that when somebody asks us why we have a certain belief or made a certain decision. And so some of this is, while you can look at it as like, oh, the models are doing things wrong, some of it to me feels like, oh, they're very human in certain ways that maybe are uncomfortable for us to admit, but that they are. And to your point about ethics, like, I know that you don't like that the model does that, but people do that too. And so should your bar be that the model is incapable of doing such a thing? If the alternative is human decision making, please don't tell me that it will be 100% rational and we won't have post facto rationalization that doesn't really mimic our thought process in it because we have that all the time today.
100%. I think we'll leave it on that today, and I will see you next week.
We will see you next week.
Have a good weekend.
Have a good weekend, Annie. Ready to expand your AI knowledge? Want to become the go-to AI expert in your organization? Take the next step with Upstart's AI certification for financial services. This comprehensive course simplifies the fundamentals of artificial intelligence for financial services professionals. Both the course and this podcast are brought to you by Upstart, whose leading AI lending marketplace connects millions of consumers to banks and credit unions that leverage Upstart's AI technology to deliver superior credit products, from personal loans to auto loans to home equity lines of credit. If you learned something useful this week, hit subscribe on YouTube or leave us a rating on iTunes or Spotify. Your support can help others discover What the AI. And finally, share your biggest AI questions and insights with us at email@whattheai.fm. We really do read every message and we do our best to cover them all on the show.